Welcome back to Building Extraordinary Brands. My name is Jacob Cass, and today we're joined by someone who's worn many creative hats and worn them well. Radim Malinic is a designer, brand consultant, entrepreneur, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of multiple ventures, including the brand new studio and Lux Coffee Co. Over the past 20 years, Radim has helped brands through immersive visual storytelling. He's published 6 books on creativity and self-development, sold nearly 100,000 paperbacks, and is currently working on his 7th, Daring Creativity, which we're going to tuck into today. He's also host creative mindfulness workshops. He speaks globally. He leads projects that bridge business, creativity, and personal growth. And in this episode, we're going to explore what it means to lead with creativity and how to build brands that go beyond just the visual, how courage, curiosity, and self-awareness play a key role in brand leadership. So Radim, there's a lot to cover here. Welcome to the show. It's finally
Hey,
great to have you on after years of back and forth and chatting and all of that, but here we are.
thanks for having me. It's really exciting because I'm a fan of what you do. I've been following, everything that you've been producing, summits, your Just Creative blog has been around for a long time. So yeah, the feelings are mutual indeed.
Awesome, man. Well, let's tuck into creativity. I think it's something we both inherently is in our DNA. Even my brand is called Just Creative, so it's there. So you've built brands, you've written bestsellers, you've started a coffee company recently. Like, what do you see as like the through line between all of this or your journey?
I think despite your beautifully worded intro, I would call myself eternally curious idiot. In a way that, to me, inspiration lies in something people do, not necessarily what they make. I grew up in Czech Republic. I moved to England when I was 21. And I've always had this mindset, even as a kid, as a teenager, like I wanted to give things go. I wanted to try and explore what these things could be. So I was an ice hockey player living in a country which was ice hockey mad. I wanted to start a band, but I didn't have an instrument, or I had bandmates, but like we had to sort of do things on the go. I stood up to the DJ decks to play DJ set, even though I've never played it before, and I've given it a go. And all of this is about sort of now versus how. Like you never do things when you're ready, otherwise you're too late to start. So for me, creativity was always personified with the album cover art. Like for me, music played a really integral part. I was a teenager in the 90s, and I always tried to stop myself saying that was the best decade in the world in the history of the planet, but it was. And yeah, the visuals, the music, the tribalism was the driving force behind everything. So I went to mostly London to go record shopping, and I've been here for 25 years and I'm not going back because I'm here. This is my home. And I didn't know that the sort of the UK creative scene, music scene, club culture, everything would be so mesmerizing that I became part of it. Like I was like, I want to be a designer. This is, I found myself. And ever since this, for the last 25 years since I've been here, I've been always trying to sort of find a way to promote myself. Like, how do I stand out? Because when you're far away from home, you carry yourself differently. Therefore, obviously you don't have that sort of safety net. You don't have your family around you. So you need to step up a little bit. At least it felt like it. And ever since I started my design career and my illustration career, I always started producing these booklets, creative booklets, like sort of like, how do I have something to send to people? Back in the day, we had iPads, we had websites, but I was like, how do I get to promote myself?
You're
And all
talking
of a
as a
sudden,
designer, like a promo book, like
like a
a
promo
portfolio in a
book.
way.
Yeah. Because at that time, I mean, we had people like Chuck Anderson, it was Joshua Davis, like it was a thriving design scene globally. And you wanted to kind of have something to your hand, to your name. So it was like, I'm going to create these tiny books, like A5 books, and send them to every agency, to every art director, to every potential client. And that was the beginning of making something like a baby, sort of like a baby step on a way to what everything's become to be now. Because I haven't sort of arrived in 2016 and say, I'm going to make my first book, proper book, let's put it on Amazon. That was a book number 5, like my test number 5. And I think, the through line, as you were asking, like what's there? Like it's an obsession with ideas that go away. Like I want to do something. I like something, I don't know much about it, hence my idiot part. Like, what do you do? How do you do this? How do you teach yourself to do it? And being eternally curious is that obsession that makes me want to go and try stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say there, the word curious sounds like a big part of this, and also having the courage and the fact that you are just daring enough to try something new and, bring your creative juice to whatever that project is. I can relate to the 90s as well. I follow a lot of like 90s meme nostalgia accounts. I've often seen like old school things pop up in the feed. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the whole like EDM scene as well, the techno and everything back then as well. A lot to relate to.
A lot.
Yeah. So was there like a moment that it all clicked or shifted? You know, you mentioned that the 90s and the club culture. Is that when you're just like, that's me?
Think the world was slightly easier, less noisy at the time. Like it was easy to find, as you talked about EDM. I was a grunge kid, I was a metal kid, like you got your sort of bags, you got your brackets, you got your pigeonholes quite easily defined. And within that sort of almost limitation, you find your freedom. So, I remember the arrival of drum and bass. It was just like, what is this? And you get this
Yes.
unrivaled feeling that you can't replace. Like literally, like you can't manufacture in another way. When you hear music for the first time, when you got these experiences for the first time, they give you this longing to repeat that experience again and again, and therefore you try to undo it yourself. And I think that was the most liberating fact, realizing that, wait a minute, no one is going to do this for me. If it's not me, it's not going to happen. And therefore loved sort of entering a country or living in a country where it seemed that they were inventing new music at lunchtime, like new genres of music at lunchtime. It was like, this was absolutely fascinating. And because it wasn't as digital, it was more community based. So you have more club nights, you have more people, like you spend more, sleepless nights chatting to people about everything. And you realize you've got connections. And this was the part that, yeah, community based spirit, in a way that you have something in common and you realize that you can be from anywhere in the world, but you can always talk about creativity, you can always talk about music, you talk about bands and stuff that you love, and there will always be someone to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy to reminisce and like put this through line between all your work and see how you got to where you are, like backtracking. And I can relate to you about drum and bass, but more recently, like with dubstep, when you first heard dubstep, you're like, "What is this?" And then like it's totally new, and you think you've heard it all, and then something totally new comes out. And I think that kind of comes back to what we do as creatives. Like we like new, we like trying solving problems, and a lot of that comes with something new. But the problem with creativity and creatives, in my opinion, is like that's a double-edged sword, right? We don't finish a project, we move on to the next project, and it can sting us a little bit. And when you chase two rabbits, you catch none, as they say. So, with that in mind, I'm curious to how you choose what you say yes to. How do you decide?
I think, as I said earlier, it's all about the sort of ideas that don't go away, because you can try to chase your two rabbits, as you just said, and then you realize they both disappear. Like you got nothing.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned throughout all of those years, that the most invaluable element of creativity is time. You get lots of people who get excited about lots of things. You can look at the huff and puff of NFTs or of like generative AI at the beginning. Like you look at these sort of micro trends that people get really excited. All of a sudden they try to change their whole identity around this, only to realize that the substance is very much lacking behind it. So I felt that everything to me was like a gradual step. Like there is a link from, every baby step all the way, let's say, to my coffee company that started as a blank page in one of my books. I just needed a mock-up. So I just created a fake, basically made up coffee company, to the point where it was so popular that I realized maybe I should try a coffee company, and I knew nothing about it. But all of these ideas never went away. This is the part of like, it's not that, I have made myself to make something. It's more about like what feels right. And mostly also proving to people that the things are possible to do, because I've been telling all of my friends how to launch a coffee company for 6 years. I've been telling people how to write books for the last 10 plus years. And guess what? None of my friends started a coffee company. None of them have written a book. None of them have started a podcast. So it's more about the fact that like you can be talking about something forever, but the message is louder when you actually make things happen.
100%. It's the action that you talk about. And just on that two rabbits thing, I was going through like a little bit of a fork in the road, and I talked to some mentors of mine, and one of them suggested that what you're chasing it actually is variety. So one of those rabbits could actually be variety, and just reframe your thinking. Like it's not necessarily about chasing one rabbit, or two rabbits, sorry. If you chase one and that rabbit is actually variety, or in your case, like creativity and all these other different projects, like, that is also a path. right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. So that was just a little bit of a mind shift for me that it's not always so black and white.
I mean, if I could add to this, I think you've got a difference between what I've recently learned, and this is secondhand information. I've learned it from a consultant called Tim Thompson, who said, if you everything that you do based on talent, then AI is very much a problem for you. If your creativity is what you do, then you always will find a variety. You will find different ways to adapt, to be resilient, to find ways that you can sort of find longevity, because right now we have lots of people being very scared about the fact that their livelihood is going away. But that curiosity is the fact that if you create your sort of creative signature style, or your identity is tied up to your talent, then you are chasing very much just that one rabbit for a very long time until you catch it and realize there's nothing else behind it. So the variety of what you said, I think is very much about that creativity, because I feel like I have pivoted 4 or 5 times in my life so far, in my 25-year sort of creative career so far. And it's been most exciting careers. Like you feel you can maximize stuff and you can go on, and it doesn't matter that, you don't do the thing you did 5 years ago.
That energy when you do pivot and you feel it feels right and you're just energized and it's a new path, it just lights you up. That's like a really great feeling. I've only had that a couple of times in my life, but I know every single time when that is. And it's just like, for example, when I discovered brand strategy and that rabbit hole, I was like, I thought I knew branding, and then this whole other marketing world opens up, and it's just like, okay, well now I'm just going all in and learning that, and then coaching comes around or whatever it may be. It's just like a new endeavor. You want to learn it, you dive in, and you just get it done and enjoy the journey. So yeah. All right, let's talk about your book, Daring Creativity. What does that mean to you?
Daring creativity. I mean, I'm excited about this one because it's kind of culmination of everything that I did in the publishing sort of space for the last 10 years and in my creative career for the last 25 years. And daring creativity isn't about the fact that, you have to be jumping out of planes to prove yourself that you are brave. It's just about doing the thing that you regret never starting. Because, as I just said, it was just a short while ago, like I can tell you how to do anything in the world. You can look up every tutorial. The information is out there. Like no one is stopping you from anything. Yet we have people kind of waiting for that permission. Like, oh, how do I do this? Or how I'm waiting for someone to ask me to do something. And in my talks, in my workshops, I use quote by Chris Cornell. We are back to the 90s, link. Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, who once said on a TV show in England called later with Jules Holland, who was interviewed, and he said, look, I thought that if I was the best musician in the world, be in the music, practice, and try to be absolutely, the most fantastic musician, the best band in the world will come and beg me to play for them. Well, that never happened. So they had to create their own dream band, and that was Soundgarden. When I think about it, I started my branding studio because the best branding studio wasn't knocking on my door. I started publishing books because the publishing contract wasn't coming. So I've started my own thing, and I did it, on the fly, fast, scrappy, agile. The best coffee company wasn't coming to beg me to do their branding. So I've decided to start my own coffee company. And I've started my own podcast because I was kind of, bored of pitching for other people's podcasts. And I realized, you know what? I have a voice that I can exercise. Actually, I can lift people up by doing something for their benefit rather than, hoping that there's something for me in this. Because we can have an easily quite selfish view of our careers because we think, hey, look, I'm doing this thing, whatever I do, and people should admire what I do, and life should be easy. Yeah. But we are like sprinters, like we can get very good for a short period of time of our lives to run that 100 meters really good. But then we get a bit slower, then we get a little bit tired, then we get a little bit sort of demotivated, and there's new sprinters coming in all the time. And you're like, oh shit, like I'm no longer faster, and they're admiring the other sprinters now. Why is it not me? Oh, wait a minute. I can tell the new sprinters how to do this better, how I can interview them. Like, how can we create a better snapshot of society, of the creative industry? Like, sprinters being creatives, like, how can I do this that we collectively grow and learn? Because as I said earlier, time in all of this is the most important time. Like we feel we don't have enough of it, but when you allow yourself to have some of it, it's the best feeling in the world. So daring creativity is based on my recent TEDx talk where I realized, I don't know about some other authors, but I've got usually 5 books sort of sketched out and thinking like, which one shall I do next? Which one shall I do? And I'll take a temperature and, again,
You're
go
hooked.
after that feel. Yeah, go after the feeling. I was like, oh, this one feels right. So as I'm practicing my TED talk, I was like, shit, this is the book I'm writing. This is what I need to do. But daring creativity isn't about sort of learning how to be, as I said, brave or bold, or it's actually learning to be, resilient, how to self-accept yourself, how to have gratitude and curiosity. This is the elements, because when you think about the training for the SAS, fighters or whatever, they are not learning necessarily to combat all the time. They're learning how to show up and not shit themselves, basically. So this is
Yeah.
like, how do you prepare creatives for the fact that what we're gonna do creatively, which is in a way quite nice and woolly and warm and friendly, it's gonna throw you around, because creativity is messy. It's meant to be messy, but we are in denial about it. Like, we want it to be easy. All of these battles of like, oh, client this and client this and client that. It's a two-way process, and we don't take that accountability. We don't always show up resilient, because we have high expectations about creative process, even though we are not ready to run yet. And that's the process. So my book was one of the test titles was called Creative Life Lessons. And everyone was like, hey, Creative Life Lessons is really good. And I'm like, I had a test for Daring Creativity, Daring Forever, because I wanted 4 words on the cover, and no one picked it. And just as I was meant to be interviewing James Victoria on my podcast, I'm like, James Victoria would never put out a book called Creative Life Lessons. He would say, so I wanted like a rallying cry. So therefore I just said, you know what, it's going to be Daring Creativity. This is my executive call. And I've showed the cover to everyone who didn't pick it. And they're like, oh, dude, good idea. I'm like, if I was to listen to you, we would be publishing something different. But I wanted something that feels singular. I wanted something that feels ownable, and I feels like it's a philosophy that I can talk about for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and it makes sense to almost anyone, because daring is to something to try, is something to go and that you've never been before.
Yeah. So you've worked across so many different industries and disciplines, and you'd have I imagine you have a pretty good feel on like what you see other creatives doing. So I'm curious, like, what's the biggest fear you see in the creative world today?
I think the biggest fear I see that I can hear about, I can see, is like the fear of acceptance, the lack of self-acceptance. Because when you think about our lives per se and how creativity slots in, it's a tool that should be giving us some form of acceptance, some form of, you know, gratitude in a way. Like, we do something, basically we create something and we hope that people will like it. And the bravery, and that's the bravery in that daring creativity, is the reason why there's an element of self-acceptance, is because you don't have to be the loudest, you don't have to be the boldest, you don't have to have the biggest logo. The battles about the biggest logo are not necessarily because people are idiots and they say like the logo needs to be bigger than anything else. It's that fear of not being enough. Like, it's that fear of like, am I good enough creative? Am I good enough, professional? Are my ideas good enough? Because we worry about what people might say about it. But what if you could switch it off for one day and say, look, I'm not going to pretend that not perfectionism is my strength, because perfectionism is a negative trait. Therefore, like, we say we are perfectionists because we worry about it. We say we are perfectionists because we want people to know that we give a shit. But what it really means is like, am I doing enough? Like, will someone think that my work is not enough? And I think that's the biggest fear, because one of the best things for a creative is experience and getting older. Like, when I crossed the fees mark, and every subsequent year it's filled with more peace and more quiet and more understanding, less needing to run that 100 meters again, and more standing on the sidelines going, I can do that. I can run that 100 meters with automation. I can save myself time. I can do something else. I can do this. I can work at all of these pieces there. There's a punch up about something absolutely fucking stupid, whereas I can just watch from sidelines, saving myself time and having time to think. And that's the best part of it, because when you live singular creative life, when you say, look, everyone else is taken, I'm here for me, it just like all those worries fall away so easily.
So how do you teach someone this? Like, is this what the book's about? Do you actually go through the steps? Or...
Yeah, the book is taking on very much the sort of 4 stages of how not to worry about the outside factors and actually how to focus on what you do. to be honest, it's another book about creative mindfulness, but it's wrapped up in a way that it's an inspirational book rather than saying, hey, look, I know you've got a problem. I know you won't admit that you've got a problem. Therefore, because you don't admit you have a problem, you're not going to buy the book. So if it was creative life lessons, you really would need to want to learn lessons. Whereas if I tell you the book is about daring creativity, you'd be like, I think I need to step up. I think, I want to be inspired how to do that thing rather than going, what problem have I got? So it's that sort of reverse psychology, because I wanted to, yeah, kind of create the simple ways of instilling into people just that element of like, you don't have to always push, 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 because the four key repeating factors in the book is to listen, to observe, to ask questions, and to understand. So I, for example, started in the creative industry like a superhero. I knew bog all about graphic design. I was in graphic design the day before I started as a graphic designer because I applied for a crappy junior job. But I do remember how empowered I felt. I was naive. My expectations were sky high. My resilience was non-existent, but I was ambitious. And obviously I realized that Clark Kent got to meet Lex Luthor, Kryptonite. And I realized that obviously this thing that I was telling myself it was going to be the smooth ride with lake, with calm lake, with no ripples and a sunset in the background, was just stormy waves and ocean, and wipeouts. So it's like, how do you get to understand? How do you get to tell people that, what? You don't have to prove yourself in a room. Like you can wait for others to speak, so you can inform yourself about what is this about. Let's say what you do with strategy. Like the strategy is not going to come up and say, look, fellas, I know what you need. I'm like, you haven't asked us a single question. And this is what happens with creativity and design. Like we try to tell people without fucking asking a single question, this is what you need to do. Well, are you telling me like the blue that you saw on someone's jumper on the way from the tube through Trafalgar Square? Okay, let's put it aside. Like, why don't you listen? Because that's okay. It's okay to listen, and understand everything that's being said. It's okay to observe the situation and why do you feel, why do you need to be there? And ask every single question, relentless questions, because you're actually going to instill more trust in yourself and in client and whoever you're working with by trying to making them not believe, but making them understand that you understand that you're asking all the questions, because volunteering bullshit is not going to get anyone anywhere. And that's the fact. Like, be calm, basically, like step back, step back. That's the key to our creativity.
100%. And the listening portion is so important. And like you said, if you're just talking and yapping away, you're not listening. And I experienced this firsthand this week. Like I've been looking for a role for my business and just speaking to people. There's people that are proactive. They come with something prepared, and there's others that just talk about themselves the whole time and don't listen. They're just like they're talking themselves up and not truly listen to the problem. And it's only through experience, right, as you said, that you come to learn the better way of I don't know, what's the word here? Understanding. I think, as you said, is one of those four. It's like how do you understand the problem at hand so you can properly diagnose and help, not just band-aid.
What you're describing with your interviews, like there's a different ways to see the creative industry or any industry, but I say we are based on ego, ambition, insecurity, and anxiety, like four different parts. The ego and ambition is your identity and your strive to do really good work. But then the anxiety and insecurity obviously are tripping you up because you are not really always sure if you're doing the right thing. The doubts seeping in because we're technically creating things for rails. Like obviously, if you create a transport, if you create not a building, like that has to have certain rules. Whereas in subjective creativity, it could be anything. Especially if you're creating anything for anything. If you're working on a brand which needs to sort of slot into certain CPG sector, if you're doing things that sort of need to have logic, that's so much easier to say, okay, we've got some rails we need to put our train on because that's where we go on our own. But when the boundaries are blurred or non-existent and when the boundary is subjective, then that would eat people alive. So your people come into your interviews and to blurting things out. That's just that's the element of ego, but insecurity, because like, oh, I need to tell you everything about me because I feel what my ego's telling me, which is sense of identity, telling me what I need to tell you about myself. Whereas if they were to sort of sit back and say, look, I don't need this job. Let's see if it's the right fit for me. Let me ask Jacob some questions. And you'll be like, holy shit, this kid wants to know something. Whereas like, oh, you try to tell me everything, whereas you don't know any questions yet.
Yeah. Well, a big part of this sounds like self-awareness, right? You need to understand that, and like self-awareness can be can be difficult at times. So how do you suggest becoming more self-aware?
I've got this really good story about flying. I use this story because I say like, hey, I used to be a nervous flyer, but I was actually a hangover flyer in my early 20s, having sort of lots of unguarded thoughts as we have sometimes, this sort of existential dread after a week, having lots of too much fun.
Uh-huh.
And I was on a flight from wherever back to London. And I didn't really know at that time that when the plane takes off, it generates the most momentum. When it's in the air, they quite rightly say, like, we're cruising at 35,000 feet. So the plane was cruising on the way to landing in London Gatwick. And I'm sitting on the wing. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I've noticed that the plane engine switched off. And I'm like, why is no one freaking the fuck out? Like, why is no one worrying about this? Because we are definitely going down. We're definitely going down. And because obviously we cruising for the landing, like the plane starts taking different sort of, tilts. And I'm like literally sweating, holding onto my thing, like onto my chair. Like, I think we are going down. But I kept it to myself because obviously, didn't want to look too weird. And thinking this is my fate. Anyway, obviously, since I'm here, obviously we didn't go down. I told a story to a friend of mine who I used to work with, and he says, oh, okay, sorry to hear that. You know what? Next time this happens to you, have a look around you. Find a guy or the woman who looks like they fly every week, the one reading the book. This dates the story to about 20 odd years ago. And he says, find them reading their book because when they lose their shit, you lose yours. Until then, you're absolutely fine. You're like, okay, that makes sense. Because we make so many false narratives in our heads. We don't live in the mindful way all the time because we take a little idea, a little snippet, a little signal, a little sort of, a sensation of thinking, oh, I'm having a heart attack, I'm doing this. Like we make, well, based on that anxiety and insecurity, can invent fake, like false narratives. We can invent false narratives by looking at social media because that's designed to make you feel anxious. So like, am I doing enough? Am I good looking enough? Am I successful enough? Have I got enough followers? When every answer to this is who cares? That's when you're fine. Whereas when when you buy into it, that's the problem of kind of working yourself up and not necessarily living in the present moment. So my flight story is a very good example, not only how I fly these days, and there's still some mad turbulence. You're thinking, this one feels a bit weird. And you look around once, no one's freaking the fuck out, so we're okay. On
Yeah.
with the,
Yeah.
Disney movie
So
or whatever.
that's like one technique, right? So looking around, you can calm yourself based on how other people are feeling. But are there any other practices that you would suggest for people, if they are comparing themselves online or if they are, trying to excel or be more creative or be more daring? Like, what would you suggest?
I mean, it all comes from gratitude. Just have a gratitude for the moment where you are, sometimes sadly compared to lots of other people in this world. Like you have more than most, like generally, like people listening to this, like most people in our industry, we have more than most other people on the planet. We have already the opportunity to listen to this podcast, make this podcast, have a copy of Photoshop or have a computer. Like that's already something that other people haven't got. And obviously what we've done with this sort of foundation baseline, we've added lots of stuff on top. So we want more clients, we want more likes, we want more of this, more of like, we don't have our enough defined. We don't know what enough looks like. And you only find your enough when you touch the bottom, when you burn out, when you overdo it, when you're overwhelmed, when you're like too stressed. When you're breaking yourself, you realize that's far too much. My way of dealing with my self-acceptance and early 30s was just to take on every single project going because I never felt there was enough projects. Speaking to one of my friends called Rick Ostenbrook, he was like, yeah, I take 3 projects maximum and I don't, I'd say yes. I say yes to these and no to everything else. And I'm like, Rick, I say yes to everything and no to nothing. And guess which one of us needed therapy? It was me because I had like 19 projects. I was burnt out. And I realized, you know what? Most of these projects are mediocre. They're a good learning curve. They're mediocre. We will never like win an award for this. We will not buy another house for this. It's a great playground, but this is impossible to keep doing forever. For doing less and doing it more thought out and actually making more headspace and taking on less, you all of a sudden realize, wait a minute, my turnover is bigger because I got space to actually have bigger conversations with bigger clients. If you just like that plane, if you build your career like the momentum of a plane that's taking off, you need to put an effort at the beginning. You need to establish yourself. You need to work on yourself. No, let's say the Gladwellian 10,000 hours. But when you're in the air, when you're cruising, you're like, wait a minute, I can just chill. I can
Yeah.
again chill and not take on too much. So again, we still got. I mean, my working lists are still long, but I've got space. You're already in a different phase, and I still try to do box breathing every day or every possible situation. Remind myself to actually take an in breath, take that sensation of actually off a full breath and holding my breath, and just mixing life, not just beyond creativity. I've got two young kids. So I cook them dinner every time. We spend time. I exercise, I cycle, walk. I go on long walks between here and the next town. Like I can actually work in the nature, and I think that's really. I feel like I've won the lottery because you can be living in the middle of the city center and have all of other people's energy and noise in your life,
Mm,
and you tell yourself, well, I'm here because I'm ambitious, but ultimately you might be breaking yourself. So
yeah.
I have designed my life in my late 40s now to the fact that I do the work with the people that have been sort of creating this network of my clients for the last 20 years. I do work that I want to do for the money I want to do on the type of work I want to do again. And that took a long time. And as I said, I had to burn myself many times to realize, you know what? I now know my enough.
That's wise words, my friend. And that's life experience, right? To have the wisdom to reflect like that and design your life your way. But I think the whole thread there is gratitude. And even just yesterday, I was kind of reminiscing. I was just in the flow, right? And I didn't get up for like 6 hours. I missed lunch and coffee breaks, didn't even get up. And it was just like, some people would say that's unhealthy. Other people would be, and it may be, but I love it. And I can work from home. I don't have a commute. I don't have to deal with office politics. My kids and family are just a step away when I need them. And that's like a lot to be grateful for. And it's a very privileged life to live that way. And at the end of it, it's like, yes, I'm kind of breaking myself here, but I do love it at the same time. But it does come back to that gratitude. So, yeah, I think, yeah, thanks for sharing your story as well. So let's jump into your books. You've sold nearly 100,000, maybe over 100,000 copies. So what's the most rewarding thing or surprising thing you've learned from your publishing journey?
I guess it's all summarized with that daring creativity term because, as I told you earlier, I didn't wait on a publishing deal. I was a world famous designer, nor I was dead, because that was used to be the two types of books that were being published at the time, which was 10 years ago. And by making those baby steps, making my own sort of, faux books, glorified booklets, whatever, I realized I can do a lot of things myself. I know X, Y, Z, how to design, where to print. And I've taught myself everything else, like how to get listed on Amazon, how to be a supplier, how to start a publishing company, how to get fulfillment house. Like I spent the first 10 years of my creative pursuits standing in a post office, annoying everyone, sending 100 books to New York and 20 books to Dallas or whatever. And I was like, okay, we've printed thousands of books. I can't be sending them from the post office. Oh yeah, there's a fulfillment and there's this and there's this. And you realize how to automate everything possible. So I was lucky my first book, of Ideas Volume 1, launched really well thanks to Design Press. So when I was publishing my second book, Book of Ideas Volume 2, because people asked for it, I was like thinking, this is going to be easy. We're just going to repeat, the press will sell thousands of copies again. And it was a much, much slower start. And I'm like, you know what I've realized for the last 10 years of publishing, everything that worked one year doesn't work another year. Like algorithm on Instagram's changed. So when people used to say, hey, this is my new book, no one posts pictures of their life on Instagram anymore, apart from influencers for no paid post. People put stuff on stories or people put stuff in their reels and like everything changes. So like realize, oh shit, I think I need to teach myself like how to really emulate a proper publishing house to actually make sure I sell books to pass in traffic rather than my audience. And I had to tell myself how to use Jungle Scout, how to learn Amazon ads and how to obviously do the right keywords and all of the stuff. And you're thinking like, what would it be more fun writing books and get somebody else to do it? But it was that learning. It was that learning, like, how does this work? Because I see my life more of a life of let's say, music producer. I produce albums. I'm not a session guitarist going, hey, look, this is my talent. This is what I do. And that's it. Not I feel like my creativity is not boxed in. So with publishing, it unlocked so many opportunities because Now, 10 years later, or 9.5 years later, I'm working as a consulting editor on other people's books because of the knowledge that I've collected, the way I can sort of put together ways of telling stories and observing the industry and using my voice as a singular through listening to others, through listening to myself, to listening to industry. Like, what do we need? How do we need this? And what does the industry per se needs from creative books? And again, when you talked about a pivot earlier, and like I'm having now conversations I could never imagine 25 years ago. My grammar's terrible, but I work with editors. I'm the one that's sort of producing these things. And when I'm in the middle of it, it's a goosebumps like no other. It's that whole thing. And I didn't realize that the bit by bit I was doing it, I was only doing them for that now. I was not thinking about the how. But it all added up together when people say, well, when you publish 6 books and sell a few, people go like, hey, how did you do it? I want to do the same.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's so many takeaways there. And like the now versus how is one that came to mind. And also the fact that you're learning along the way. And I was having a chat with a fellow called Joe Burns, who's a strategist. And we had a chat about this. So failure having a compounding effect versus you could have, hired someone to do this for you. But the fact that you went through the motions and you failed and you learned and then things changed and you adapted, you learn through that process, and that's how you get experience. And now you can pass that experience on. So that failure has a positive compounding effect with your growth as a creative. So I think that's what I heard when I was hearing that story.
Yeah, I mean, and no part of those books were like I was preoccupied with perfectionism. Like perfectionism never came into it. I was like very much working at every single step, every single time, and I never worried. What first time I worried about, oh, if I use this particular word, someone might have a problem with this. Then you realize it's gonna get lost in the rest of the words. And I work with editors where I just literally write my messy copy. I write my notes, everything. I write whatever I can, I overwrite and then give it to an editor, and the editor cleans it up, obviously, and it goes out. And I realized that I can't be hanging on to my silly jokes, my silly dad jokes that sometimes I put in a book, and the editor goes like, "This fact that like this doesn't make sense. What you saying here?" And I could be going, "I really want to be funny," or I can be really clever, and that's why I've got an editor to sort it out. So again, it's very much the now versus how. Like I'm doing this as an expression, and I never really worried about like, oh, this page needs to be a particular way, this needs to be that way, this needs to be this way, because it's a body of work. When you think of it like a music album, sometimes the tambourine gets lost in the background. Sometimes the guitar could sound better, but you accept it for what it is because it's a body of work.
Totally. All right. So jumping ship to your coffee company. So totally different from publishing. What's different about like a product-based brand, like a coffee brand versus say publishing or consulting work or anything? Like what's been different?
It's not very that much different. I mean, it's just, again, it goes through that not knowing anything, being curious idiots, to knowing something, to knowing even more, and to realizing that this is growing, this is interesting. So, Lux Coffee, as I hinted earlier, came up as an idea in my second book because I literally had 2 blank pages. I had a coffee mock-up from Yellow, and I was like, I have this pattern, I have this. At that time, the Best of Packaging as an Instagram account was popping off, like we were all sort of doing mock-ups and whatever, like, outdoing each other. I was like, F it. Like, I'm going to put, literally, my daughter's middle name is Lux Coffee Roasters. I just put something, on the mock-up, put in a book, didn't think much about it, put it online on Instagram. And at that time, the algorithm was kind of in favor of such things, so it was just going off and off and off. It was being reshared. And I kid you not, it had altogether about 500,000 likes across like 150, different accounts. And I'm like,
Wow.
am I starting a coffee company? Because once you start one company, you're like, well, how difficult is it to start another company? Like, I've got a design company, I've got a publishing company. Well, how difficult is it to start a coffee company? Then you realize, what do you need about coffee? What do you know about coffee? I was like, actually very little. I know it tastes good, it smells good, but where does it come from? What's the bags? But like, so baby steps again. Like, I spoke to roasters and I said, hey, how can I start this? You can watch videos on YouTube, and there's a video of a guy like literally must have had coffee for every day for about a year. Well, not like must have had a lot of coffee for every day for about a year, because he's wired. He's telling you his story, and it's amazing, right? And I'm like, if he can do it, he's not a designer, I can do this. I know how to do the brand. And I had to teach myself about the different types of coffee from different regions, about single origins, about blends, about You know, the methods, all of that stuff, packaging, like the processing, roasting. I taught myself as I was learning all of this. So from someone who used to be like instant to Nespresso pod now, like I ask people like,
Yeah.
hey, what's your workflow? I'm that dickhead now. We're like, hey, what's your workflow? Like, what's your temperature? But it's that beautiful mastery because that information is available and it can make a simple product so much more enjoyable. So the idea was to create a coffee company with a purpose, but then the world doesn't necessarily need another coffee company when you think about it. But it could be another coffee company that actually shows people that there's a better coffee, especially to creatives, because the Nespresso pod, you'll find it in many, many different agencies because it's easy, because it's convenient. But every convenience is a lie. And espresso is a horrible coffee, like don't sue me, but it's pre-roasted. It's been in a pod for months, and it's not always that nice, but it's convenient because you press it, tastes better than instant. So I wanted to create a coffee company that now actually, with the progress of the company, is like it's creative first. So we rebranded the company to actually champion creativity, have like lots of collaborators. We're going to have people like Oliver Jeffers and James Victoria and all the others, Karina Ledmeyer, providing limited edition packaging. I'm talking to Adobe about doing events. It's about something different all of a sudden. It's like, it's not just about coffee. It's actually about how do we bring the community together and propagate it in a way by doing a B2B programs with some of the best studios in London, giving them coffee machines and giving them like supplying with their coffee. Because the whole idea of the reasons why a mindful moment matters comes from my books. It's like I wanted to have good coffee and actually take some time out from work. And I'm like, I've got time to breathe. I've got time to think, have to have less on your plate for at least a few minutes and enjoy it. Like ultimately it's about that simple pleasure of like discovering coffee from, an amazing lot from another, another side of the world and sharing that with people. So that was the sort of the long birth of the company, but it's so rewarding.
Yeah, wow. I can relate to the story, right, of coffee drinkers. Like you start at the sugary frappuccinos and you move into the instant and maybe the pods, and then you get a entry level coffee machine, and then, a full on espresso machine with a grinder and all of that. And that's exactly my journey. Exactly my journey. Drink multiple cups a day. The thing that stood out for me here when you're talking about the product, it's not actually a coffee company. It's not a coffee product. It's the brand, right? You're coming from a brand perspective, and you said champion creativity, and it's not about the product or the coffee beans, but it's about bringing that community together and making them, or giving meaning behind it, right? And bringing other people into it and champion that idea of creativity and connection with coffee. And I love that. Yeah, check out Lux Coffee Co. if you're curious. I wish I could get it here in Oz, but yeah, it's I don't think customs would like that too much.
Yeah, my idea, just if I can jump in, my idea was something to build something similar to Deus Ex Machina. I'm not a biker, I'm a amateur surfer, but when I walked into Deus Temple of Enthusiasm in Bali in Canggu, some crikey, 15 years ago now, I was like, what is this? I want this poster, I want this t-shirt, I want this, I want this notebook. And this is what I'm trying to sort of create with this, because every designer starting a product company is an excuse about making merch. So I worked with Julie Solstrom on the branding just so we can print merch, but the beautiful part about having this is obviously creating a product, creating a philosophy, but everything is automated. I am not roasting coffee. We've got partners doing this with us. All the merchandise is printed on demand. It's automated. So again, you're creating this dropshipping company where the more or less it's a brand building exercise where I want to have Lux Coffee Company established in a way of like Deus or Map or whatever, like basically when you can collaborate with other brands and have this sort of cross pollination of philosophies and creative ideas that you can do all of these things. So there is conversation like having co-branded furniture, like coffee, like a chairs and like a coffee tables and all of that stuff, just because you're creating something that stands of its own, like with that, I don't know, I can't really express it now, but like having that sort of unique visual storytelling that, it's unique to the brand and it's transferable that you can work with others. So yeah, you can build an emporium or, empire on your own, or you can work with others and get there much faster.
Oh yeah, I think it'll come full circle here around automation and being creative and being daring and learning along the way. It kind of feeds into the title of this pod. I think we're going to wrap up here, but are you ready for a quick fire round?
You can try.
Okay, right. All right. A creative piece of work that's changed how you think.
I think it must be some album covers. Like, I think it was how I got into this. Because for me, the way that I think it would be coming from actually modern philosophy, people like Alain de Botton, School of Life, their work of what they do in that sort of modern psychotherapy space has really influenced a lot of way how I approach my creativity, how I understand other humans. And I always go after that feeling rather than the visual work. But there's a lot of, I mean, there's definitely lots of pieces of work that inspired me visually.
Okay. Well, I want to follow up question. This is interesting. So, what you mentioned a piece of work. I'm not that familiar with it, but why did it change how you think?
It just felt non-linear. Like it felt like there was another door to creativity, which wasn't necessarily like, another font, another color, another, another piece of illustration. I think I discovered the School of Life around 2010, 2011, and that was that time where, it was highly digital scene, like was the digital illustration, advertising. It felt noisy, it felt interesting. But if you went to a design talk, it would be like, as it still is, look at my portfolio. This is what I did. This is this. Whereas I was searching for meaning. I was searching for meaning and the feeling and the purpose and the idea of like where we going with this, because you can be showing up to interviews or job pitches or feedback session with just a singular mind of like, hey, this is my creative work. This is what we did. And people say, why, how, what, how do you connect it? How do you see beyond, these doors and, this industry? And you have no answers. So I felt like thinking about how we operate as humans, as a society, how we are hardwired, what hinders our progress and what can improve our progress, is more about understanding other human beings and myself. Like, how do we work on this? So, it was lots of therapy as well to make sure that I understand exactly what's within. Yeah, it's more about, yeah, that connection between the human and the creativity and art and, therapy.
Good. All right, good. Thanks for sharing that. Not so not so quick fire, but it's all right. It was my fault. All right,
Sorry.
a branding trend that's overhyped.
I think branding trend is overhyped. I think I get my, what's the right way to say it? I get annoyed, but I just hate branding studios that now produce work that's pretty much just cookie cutter. It's all the same, like all the stuff looks the same. But then they show up, the founder or the creative director shows up on LinkedIn and just says, hey, so this is what we created. We worked for the feeling. We did this and we did that. And I'm like, if you did that work, why do you need 400 words to tell me what you did? And I think what thing that's overhyped or that's overused and that should die a death is designers pretending to be some sort of faux philosophical strategist or some sort of like beyond feeling meaning sort of creators. Because if you do the work right, you don't have to tell anyone because they'll get it. But if you need to justify it, I don't think it's right. So I think that's just people should lay off of that.
Yeah, more showing, less talk. More showing, less telling, I guess is a way to put it. All right.
Yeah.
A lesson you wish more creators would learn earlier.
I think to find out that you are capable of so much more than anybody else and that you have a lot less fear than you actually think. Because, with my flying story and some of my sort of anxieties and phobias, I thought that I was potentially like the less the least fearless person in the room. Only after I started speaking to everybody else and realized like potentially I might be the bravest person in the room, because you don't have that marker of actually where you are or how you're against other people or how everyone else is feeling. Because the saying says, go and solve someone else's problem only to realize how little small your problems really are.
Yeah.
And I think, that's kind of goes with the whole of creativity. Like, go and try something and help somebody else to create something, but then you realize actually what is that in for you. So
Wise
that could
words.
potentially be one of those things.
Very wise. All right, last one. One thing every brand needs but often misses.
I would like to say soul. Every
Mm.
brand needs a soul, but how do you manufacture something that's soulless? With everything that we need and produce, that we create so many brands with fake stories just because we need to have a story. But if the brand has a soul, you don't have to know, you don't have to say much. You just do what you do, and you prove your action and prove your purpose with your soul and with just being and doing the right stuff.
Yeah, and that really does come back to brand building and especially your coffee story, right? There's so many coffee brands out there and just so easy to launch your own these days. But what isn't easy is building a brand and meaning behind it. So yeah, I love that soul is important, like the DNA of the brand, like the essence as well. All right, wrap up. let's hear, like, where can listeners connect with you, like your books, and so forth?
So I think the best place is to find me via LinkedIn or from my personal website, which is radimmalinic.co.uk. LinkedIn or that, or my Instagram at radim.malinic, because I've got so many different websites, so many different places, but this is the one where you can find me. On my personal website, you can download all 6 of my existing books as a samples. So you can kind of jump into my ecosystem and you will get links to my podcast, links to my books, links to everything I do. You know, the coffee's promoted via the podcast. And yeah, jump in and come and ask lots of questions, because I'm at that beautifully content place of my life where I'm here for others. I'm here to help, because again, you know, as soon as you start talking to people about their problems, you realize mine problems almost don't exist, you know. And I think that's the best part, because I'd like to give you back, because if I was to say one sort of parting thing, is that most of our times we try to make sense of things, be in life, be in creativity, industry, clients, money. You know, we try to make sense because we don't always get enough information given to us by parents, by society. And therefore, it feels like we're on a quest. And sometimes it feels like life is unfair, that you have to go and find all of this information. But again, it goes back to that things we said earlier. You can listen for a bit, you can ask questions, observe, and understand. So superpowers, 4 superpowers that are not absolutely available to anyone, only if you allow yourself to exercise them.
I love it. And gratitude. That's the grounding one here. All right. Thank you so much. What a great chat. I'm so glad we could finally make this happen. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. As I said, I'm a big fan of what you do, and yeah, this was lots of fun. Thank you.
Building extraordinary brands.